Hello, this is a Python game. It's a project that I've been working on for a little bit now, just to mainly test out my Python abilities and to just get some practice in and show off what I can do. So this is the game. It's a two-player game. You control these two characters individually. They shoot lasers at each other like this, and that's essentially it. It's just played on the keyboard right now. Um, and I'm just going to be going over a lot of how I made this and showing it off. So this is the main part here. It starts from here where it defines everything. It gives the players. The players are just a class. It gives the screen effect, and then it defines that object, which is just that white thing that you saw on the screen. It goes over everything here, and this is the main body. The way I set this up was essentially I created some classes, and everything is pretty much controlled by the player class, which is inserted into the player list, and then it iterates through the player list, and then it iterates through the data in the player objects themselves and essentially works through that. So here's the player class itself, defined in another folder. Uh, sorry, not folder, file. Anyway, so essentially, in order to initialize it, you got to get the size, the coordinates, the color, the directions facing the image, and the player number. It goes over through all this, depending on how you do it. Of course, it'll set up the thing on the screen. It also makes a health bar. It makes these sort of things for using like iframes, like to make sure that doesn't immediately die if you use a type of bullet. This is to calculate the border. This is everything for attacks, including the type. This is to measure where the nozzle goes. And this is where I store all the things that it houses or stores, right? Like cosmetics, particles, and projectiles, and I'll show you how that works. So essentially, it all works off of the several different types of classes I've defined. So I said you have the player class, and then it stores more classes or instances of those classes in the player instance. So we have things like projectiles. This has damage, how long the projectile sticks around, the direction that it's going to head in, and then this is all of Pygame's defined functions. So then we have essentially what is shoot, which is just makes it move. So this is a very simple class. Then we have something a bit more complex here. This is the cosmetics class. This takes the it takes the type of what you want to draw, the argument list, which is essentially a list of the arguments or variables that you enter into Pygame itself, the effect that I have created that you want to make, and then the duration, which is optional, but should be used in a lot of them. Anyway, it will eventually go away itself if it fades away, but some of them you have to define the duration. Anyway, essentially the way I've set it up is that wherever you create the class is where you give the instance of the class all of the data it needs in order to appear on the screen. There's not an actual part where I pass in parameters into the classes themselves or the functions themselves in order to create something. It's all stored in the individual class. So I'll show you here. We have, let's see, cosmetics, right? This is all you need. For I in for in cosmetics, I'm using enumerate here, value.create. This is actually all you need in order to make the cosmetics work, because each instance of the class has all the data that it needs in order for this function to create everything on the screen. That's this function here. Um, this will make sure that the colors are within range, and then you get into like line, circle. These are the types, right? So if you want to draw a line or if you want to draw a circle, and then the effects. So we have fade, medium, fade, small, and flash. And I'll show you a bit of that later. Then you have the other bigger class here. This is the pixels class. This is essentially a class that creates the particle effects. So you see, you have things like the beams going off. The pixels are essentially all the white dots you see here, the trail of the actual spaceship itself, as well as the little thing that appears in front of the ship before it shoots, and all, of course, the particles when it shoots. It's also what goes around the screen when another thing gets destroyed. So these are all part of the pixels class. Now, the pixels class is what creates those effects. It is not the actual points on the screen itself. Those points are the box class, which is what is defined within the pixels class. So the pixels class is essentially just a class that houses the different types of effects, and then you have the box class, which is a much simpler class that is what you actually see on screen. See, this is the box class. This is all that it's needed. Simple stuff. So essentially, for something like an attack, right? We are in the player class right now, and it has the function of attacks defined. This checks if it's certain type. It checks if attacking, and if attacking is true, it goes through all this stuff. So what it does is essentially, there's a while loop that creates a projectile, and then immediately creates a projectile in front of that using trigonometry to define which way it's going. So that would be like this. So what I've done here is I've gotten rid of all the cosmetics, and you can actually see the hitboxes of the projectiles themselves. So it just really quickly calculates how far away it is from the screen, or, well, really what it does is that it creates a projectile in front of the other one until they go off screen. So you get this line that really quickly appears and goes away, and then while it's on screen, it checks each hitbox to see if it's over the other ship, and then if it is, then it knows it's hit it, and then the other ship, of course, explodes. However, of course, for the actual game, for that demonstration, I was making hitboxes white. But for the actual game, I make them black and I hide them under a lot of other parts of the screen so that it looks better. Cool, and then we have a demonstration of the Pixels class. So this actually goes for every time one of those projectiles are created, the Pixel class is called, which defines the type, right? So we have Pixel class, and it gets the exact center of where the projectiles are made, and then adds the laser pixels type, which is what you see here. So whenever this guy fires, it's these pixels that get created that flow in a certain direction. So just as an example of why I made it this way is because it's very easy to change. So if I go back down to attacks here, just as an example, if I changed laser pixels just to implosion, then all of a sudden this screen will, instead of displaying what you just saw, will instead display this. Right? You see how right in front of the ship, all of the things are connected right in front of the screen? That is because for each projectile that is being created that you saw earlier, which were the white squares, it is instead being placed in front of the ship. This is a bit of a bad example. This will be a better one. This might create a bit of lag just because it will be a lot of pixels, but it's a better example. This is object explosion, which doesn't get automatically set in front of the player character. So instead, when I shoot this laser, every hitbox of the laser will explode. So it's going to do this, which, yeah, creates quite a bit of lag because this is, I think, at least probably about 3,000 pixels being generated. But anyway, this is just to show that it's very, very easily modifiable. And actually, all I have to do whenever I want to create one of these things is just add in the certain information that I want, add in the type, and then the class handles the rest. So it's a very modifiable way. Um, and then whenever I want to add another one, I just add it to the pixels class, and then I'm able to call it again as many times as I want anywhere else. I also added like another class called objects, which is what I use for the health bars at the top. I'll show you that now. I have to change the attack type to shot. This is a bit of a bad way of doing this, but it's still in its early phases, right? So it's not that important. Whoops, I accidentally added in the wrong one. It was supposed to be done down here. Okay, here we are. So now instead of shooting the beam, it shoots these little shots. If you'll notice, the background color is actually changed and slightly turns blue or red depending on which one is shooting. So if they both shoot like this, you see that the background turns to blue and red. Now it's just red. Now it's just blue. So just a little bit of added effects there. The projectiles will hit objects in the other player, and depending on how much health they have, will, of course, deal damage. So if you look at the top left, you'll see that we have the health bar for the red ship. So I hit it, it blinks, it has a moment of iframes, and then eventually, if I take it all the way down, it explodes and the game ends. This is really just a simple rundown of how this works. The main idea is essentially you have the player class that holds all the functions for the players, of course. Then you have several different types of classes inside of classes that will continue to handle all of the things that you see on the screen. You put that all together, blend it all together, and eventually you have something that looks a bit like a game. I could add a lot more. I'm not sure I will. I think this project is just about done for what I want to do with it and its usefulness to me. But anyway, just something showing off.